To make the ball look like shiny reflective plastic, we need to have some kind of environment for it to reflect. And an easy way to do that is to create a sphere and place an image on that sphere. And that will be a simple fake environment that will appear in reflections. To make this clearer, I'm going to move the ball back down to the ground plane. Grab the move tool, just position that very close or even touching the ground plane, and press the F key once again to frame it. We won't be able to see any reflections in the viewport here, but when we actually render the shot, we will be able to see shiny highlights as well as coherent reflections of an image in the surface of the ball. But to do that, we need to have some kind of environment. So let's create an environment sphere or sky dome. Dolly back out again. Go to the Create menu and choose Polygon Primitives Sphere. And click and drag to create a sphere. Let's go over to the channel box. I'll close the attribute editor. Go to the input node here and set it to a really high radius. Let's give it 2,000 units in radius. And just zero out its position. And maybe give it a little bit more detail. I'll set the subdivision axis to, let's say, 40. And the subdivision's height to 30. And now we've got more detail on that sphere. And of course, we need to assign a material. But this is going to be a special material, one that does not react to any lighting in the scene. If this is going to be the sky and the environment, we don't want it to be lit by the Maya lights. We want it to be fully self-illuminated. And there's an easy way to do that by using something called a surface shader. With the object selected, right-click and choose Assign New Material. And choose Surface Shader from the Assign New Material dialog. The attribute editor opens up once again, and let's rename this surface shader. We'll call it Environment Shader, and press Enter. In the out color, we'll drop a map. Click to assign a new render node, and that will be a file node once again. And then we need to browse for the image. We want to choose this one that says Ross DeHaro Polar Hemisphere.png, and click Open. And now if we dolly fully back, we will see that we have a nice texture on here, but the placement is not optimal. We want to adjust the tiling on the surface. In the attribute editor, get to the Place 2D texture node. Click on that tab, and here you'll see Repeat UV. U and V are the latitude and longitude on the surface of the sphere. I'll set Repeat V to a value of 2. Which means that the texture will repeat twice in the up, down, or longitudinal axis. Cool, so that's our environment. Now we want to delete the bottom half of that sphere. Let's do that from the orthographic views. Tap the space bar, and in the front view, dolly out. And we could imagine that we could just simply delete the bottom half here, but there's something that may trick us here, which is that we're not quite sure where the positions of the orthographic cameras are, which means that we're not quite sure if we're going to select all of the polygons or not. So this now gets a little bit strange, but what we need to do here, just to make sure that we're selecting all the polygons, is to make all the orthographic cameras visible and go into Display, Show, Cameras. And if we dolly back in the perspective view, we see something strange, which is that things start to disappear. Okay, what's going on here? Well, two things. First of all, we need to move the orthographic cameras, but we can't really do that because we can't see them, because when we get far enough away, everything gets clipped off. This is the far clipping plane of the perspective camera. So let's go into the perspective camera attributes. View, Camera Attribute Editor, and you'll see Near Clip Plane and Far Clip Plane. I'll set the far clip plane to 50,000 centimeters. And then when I dolly back, things don't disappear. Okay. Tumble around here, and what we're seeing is this big square is in fact the front viewport. And if I click on that, we see the label front. And we need to move it backward. Because as you can see, as I move this camera forward and back through the environment sphere, things get cut off in the front viewport here. the viewport can only see in front of itself in the direction of this green line. I need to pull this all the way back. And I want to do the same for the top and side views as well. I'll dolly back in the top view with the wheel, and that will make the icon of the camera larger. Then I can click on it and move it. And same thing with the side view. I got to dolly back until I can actually see that camera icon, and then select it and then pull it backward. And now I've positioned all the orthographic cameras so that they can enclose the entire scene, and they're all looking into that scene. All right. Now and only now can we be sure, if we make a selection of polygons on our environment sphere, that in fact all the polygons will be selected. Okay, we can hide the cameras once again. Display, hide, cameras. And in the front view, let's go into wireframe mode. Press the 4 key. And we'll select in component mode. Select that sphere. Right click, get the marking menu, and choose face component mode. And now we can select individual polygons. Use the select tool, and then drag a rectangle to select the bottom half of the sphere. And notice that the select tool will select any polygon that it touches. So although I didn't select these top row of polygons completely, they got selected because the crossing window actually touched them. And just to make absolutely certain that we've selected those polygons, we probably want to look in our perspective view, maybe go out of the textured mode, press the 5 key for a second, so we can just be absolutely certain. And then with those polygons selected, press the delete key on the keyboard. Cool. We can go back to textured mode here, press the 6 key, and we can go back to object mode, right click on the object and choose object mode. Okay, so we've set up our hemisphere, and once we've done all of that, we want to delete its construction history because we've made some changes here. Go to the edit menu and choose delete by type history, and now the history nodes have been deleted here. Cool. Now we also want to do a couple things here to the environment sphere so that, for example, it won't cast shadows or it won't receive shadows. And we also want to set it up so that we don't actually see it in shaded mode in all the views because it might get distracting. With that sphere selected, go to the attribute editor, Control A, and go to the P-Sphere Shape 1 node, which is the mesh node. And we want to open up render stats and disable cast shadows and receive shadows. If we don't do this, then later when we add a directional light, the light will not reach our scene because it'll be blocked by the environment. Cool. And additionally, we want to make it so that this will always display in wireframe in all views. And that can be found under Object Display, Drawing Overrides, and Enable Overrides, and Turn Off Shading. So now that object will always display as wireframe. It'll still render, and it'll still show up in reflections, but now we won't be distracted by it blocking our view of the actual scene. Okay, so let's just now rename it. I'll go over to the channel box and I'll call it Environment Sphere. And just move it down a little bit. I'm going to set the translate Y value to -1000. And that'll just ensure that the reflections will appear on the surface of the bouncing ball. And now we're ready to increment and save once again.